On August 12, 2000, a Norwegian seismic station recorded two explosions in the Barents Sea. The first measured 1.5 on the Richter scale. The second measured 4.2, equivalent to a small earthquake picked up by sensors as far away as Alaska. The Russian Navy said nothing for 6 hours. 118 men were at the bottom of the sea. 23 of them were still alive. The K-141 Kursk was one of the largest submarines ever built, 154 meters long, nuclear-powered, designed to locate and destroy United States aircraft carrier groups. It carried 24 torpedoes. Each warhead was capable of sinking a carrier. The Russian Navy considered it unsinkable. By 2000, the fleet that housed it had spent a decade in collapse. Submarines rusted at their moorings. Maintenance budgets were gone. Equipment that should have been replaced was patched, logged as functional, and returned to service. None of that appeared in any official statement. The Kursk had completed only one mission in 6 years. During that deployment, its emergency rescue buoy, the device designed to surface automatically and transmit the submarine's position if something went wrong, was intentionally disabled. They didn't want NATO to detect them. When the Kursk returned to base, nobody reconnected it. 11 months later, 118 men would need it. On August 10, 2000, the Kursk joined the Summer X exercise in the Barents Sea, the first large-scale Russian naval exercise in more than a decade. Its assignment was routine: simulate a torpedo attack on the flagship of the Northern Fleet. For many of the crew, it was their first time at sea. The torpedo chosen for the drill was fueled with high-test peroxide, a hydrogen peroxide compound used as an oxidizer. Cheaper than the standard alternative, also far more volatile. The British Royal Navy had banned HTP torpedoes in 1955 after one detonated in harbor and killed 13 men. Russian naval officials had received written warnings about the same risk. The warnings were filed. Nothing changed. The torpedoes were cheaper. At 11:28 on the morning of August 12, a weld on the torpedo's casing failed. Hydrogen peroxide contacted the copper lining of the tube. The chemical reaction was immediate and uncontrollable. In less than 30 seconds, the first explosion tore through the forward torpedo room. Everyone inside died before they could move. 2 minutes and 15 seconds later, 5 combat-ready warheads detonated in sequence. The force registered 4.2 on the Richter scale. Seismographs in Norway recorded it. Sensors in Alaska recorded it. The naval exercise on the surface continued for 2 more hours. Nobody stopped it. The Kursk came to rest on the floor of the Barents Sea at 108 meters. Its bow was buried in the silt. Its forward compartments no longer existed. Most of the crew died in the first 2 minutes, many without ever knowing what had happened. In the aftmost section of the submarine, in the 9th compartment, 23 men were alive. They sealed the hatch above them. They sat in the dark, in a steel compartment filling slowly with cold seawater, and they waited. There was no way to signal the surface. The emergency buoy, the one device built exactly for this moment, was still disabled from the Kosovo deployment 11 months earlier. Disconnected to avoid detection, never reconnected. The men in compartment 9 did not know that. They waited for a sound from outside. No sound came. The Russian Navy waited 6 hours before launching a search. When they located the Kursk on August 14th, their rescue vehicles could not attach to the escape hatch. The equipment had not been properly maintained. 4 attempts across 4 days failed. Officials told the families gathered at the naval base in Vidyayevo that rescue was imminent, that knocking had been heard from inside the hull, that the men had oxygen, that they were alive. None of that was verified. Some of it was invented. Britain offered help on August 12th, the same day the submarine sank. The United States, Norway, and 9 other countries made the same offer. Russia refused all of them. Vladimir Putin was on vacation at a Black Sea resort when the Kursk went down. He stayed for 5 days. On day 6, he did not go to Vidyayevo, where 118 families were waiting for any information at all. He went to a diplomatic summit. When journalists asked why he hadn't come back immediately, he said the situation was being handled. He was later asked on American television what happened to the Kursk. He paused. He smiled. "It sank," he said. On August 17, 5 days after the explosions, Russia accepted help from Britain and Norway. One condition: no foreign personnel would enter the submarine. Norwegian divers arrived 2 days later. On August 21, working in the same waters the Russian Navy had spent 5 days describing as impossible to navigate, they opened the escape hatch in under 2 hours. The compartment was flooded. There were no survivors. What the salvage operation recovered the following year made the timeline exact. 23 men had survived for at least 6 to 8 hours after the second explosion. They had air, they had each other, and then they tried to fix the oxygen regeneration system, cartridges designed to scrub carbon dioxide from the air. When the cartridges contacted seawater that had entered the compartment, they ignited. The fire was immediate. 3 of the men sustained severe burns across their upper bodies in a pattern consistent with one thing: they had placed themselves between the fire and the others. The oxygen was consumed. The remaining men died of hypoxia and hypothermia, sealed inside a steel hull at the bottom of the Barents Sea, in the dark, while officials on the surface told their families that rescue was underway. Captain Lieutenant Dmitry Kolesnikov wrote a note after the explosions. He wrote it in the dark, in a flooding compartment, knowing the air was running out. He listed all 23 names. He wrote that the men with him were not in despair. Then he wrote one final sentence to his wife. He folded the note, wrapped it in plastic, and put it in his breast pocket. It was found there during the salvage, more than a year later. His body was severely burned. The note was still legible. On August 22, Putin traveled to Vidyayevo to meet the families. Cameras were present. Nadezhda Tillich, whose son Sergei was among the dead, confronted him directly, her voice rising, her hands moving. While she was still speaking, a woman in civilian clothes stepped behind her and pressed a syringe into her arm. Tillich went silent. The footage aired on Russian state television. Officials said the injection had been given at the woman's own request, for her well-being. In the weeks that followed, Russian Naval Command announced that the Kursk had been struck by a NATO submarine. The claim was repeated by the fleet commander, his chief of staff, and the head of the Russian Navy, who stated he was 80% certain. No physical evidence of a collision was ever found. The admirals who made the claim were not investigated. They received senior government appointments. The 2001 salvage operation recovered 115 bodies. The bow, containing the torpedo room and all physical evidence of the initial explosion, was left on the seabed. In July 2002, the official investigation concluded that a faulty torpedo weld caused the disaster, citing negligence and mismanagement at every level of the Naval Command. No individual was charged. No one was tried. The full investigation, 133 volumes, remains classified. In 2009, a journalist found the conning tower of the K-141 Kursk in a scrapyard in Murmansk, rusting, abandoned. It is now a memorial overlooking Kola Bay, 4 kilometers from the base where the Kursk was stationed. The bow is still on the floor of the Barents Sea.